What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 75 of Nintendo Noise, Slip Screen Games' weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Messi, joined, as always, by my very good friend and co-host, making his grand return to the show, Mr. ChuyPlays.
Fire Emblem Engage.
Goodbye, goodbye.
Yeah, that's the one.
That was the line, that's it.
I
Man!
always love when they just say the Fire Emblem title at the beginning of Fire Emblem games. It's just nice. It's like Sega going, Sega. I love that stuff.
Do you remember because I think the most iconic Sega was the Sega, right? Like, but like, do you remember the one that was just like the yell? There's like clips where it's just like,
yeah.
Sega! It's just like, why did you like? One of them is like one of the like the most. It's so like, it's so calm and
man.
like jingle is so iconic, and then it's just like something that is gonna give you an anxiety attack.
That just reminded me of the Animal Crossing one too for the GameCube, where it's like Nintendo, and they kind of had like some different ones for that too, and I just love it when they have a little character saying the name of the game or the company.
Yeah, well, you know what I love, Chewy, is having you back on the show. It's been quite some time since you've been able to grace us with your presence, so it's super great to have you back. And of
We're
course,
on 75 already. This is wild.
I know, it's crazy, man. The show's been going a while now. You know, we're still running strong thanks to all you guys listening at home. So thank you for tuning in for another Nintendo Noise. On this week's show, of course, we're going to talk about Fire Emblem Engage. Fire Emblem Engage has released just this past week to, I'd say, like, not unanimous praise, but mostly high. Some very interesting, an interesting spectrum. We talked about that a bit last week. There were some surprisingly low scores, and there was a lot of conversation about going into this, like, is it going to hit, right? Is it going to be able to match what Three Houses was for me as a new player? Is it a game that appeals to players that don't have a super long legacy with Fire Emblem? Like,
and I'll tell you, like I have history with the series. I love it, and even I was skeptical going into this one.
And rightfully so. You know, like I think it was a game that the more you learn about its development, right, the plan was for it to come out on the anniversary, and it feels like that, right? It feels like, or at least the marketing made it feel that way. It made it feel like it was not quite a proper mainline entry as much as it was kind of like a greatest hits, like, side game. And you know, I'm happy to report that I think that is an unfair assessment of the game. I think it is really good. Like, is the story as good as Three Houses? No, and we'll talk about that in specific detail in a minute. But I think, you know, if your mindset going into it is you wanted to play it for the story, you'll be disappointed. But I think if you want to play it because you like Fire Emblem and you want to play horny chess, it's some good horny chess. So, like, I think, you know, I am surprised by how taken I am with it. Because I really like Three Houses. I love tactical RPGs. I went into it kind of expecting to at least like the gameplay. But like, I'm in it, man. Like, it's one of those where I'm thinking about it when I'm not playing it. I was going to sleep last night, and I don't know if you ever have this when you play a game for like a really long time and you close your eyes and then you like see it in your head.
Yes.
You know, like I was like strategizing about a match I'm not even playing anymore, and I'm like, oh, I'm obsessed with this. Like, this is it's got its hooks in me deep.
I am at the same place with it, honestly. Like, I was sitting at work all day today, and I was just like, man, I can't wait to go home and talk about this game and then probably play it right after too.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it does a lot of cool things. Like, I will say, I initially went into the concept going like, we already have Fire Emblem Heroes on mobile, which is the collectathon of all your favorite Fire Emblem characters from every series and everything. And I was like, how is this gonna feel different or better than that in some way? And in a lot of ways it is, because obviously, like, the mobile game is definitely like a watered down version of Fire Emblem. It's got the basic structure there, basic strategy and everything, but I honestly like auto battle my way through like most of the stuff in that game just because my units are so strong at this point. And so it's nice
Yeah.
to go back to a game where you're like, "Oh, man." I sit there just struggling. What I don't know why I do this to myself. I'm playing on classic
Yo, me too.
again.
Yeah, me too. Let me ask you this:
I
what difficulty are you playing on?
I put it on normal because
Okay,
it's usually I do hard and everything, but then I'm like, no, I can't just sit here and reset this level the whole
dude.
time. Like
I started
I'm
on
gonna.
I started on maddening because I was like, let's do it, like let's go crazy. And oh my god, dude, it's hard.
It's like in the past, I wonder how they've improved on like maddening. In the past, you had like the lunatic mode and whatever. Stuff was literally just made for you to die, and it was completely unfair. Everything was just like you're gonna fail in that mode.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder, is that how it feels in this one? Does it just feel like everybody's critting you the whole time,
It
or?
it wasn't that bad, but it was like it accentuated things that are already difficult about the game early game, and then it also
Mhm.
like added a ton of units. So like the this isn't a spoiler. There's an encounter that I know you've gotten to because we're both in the exact same part of the game. It's one of the first post um tutorial levels, and
Yeah.
it's like in the kingdom, and there's like the thieves that go up the side. You know the one I'm talking about? They go to
Mhm.
like steal the
Mhm.
treasure.
Yeah.
So on that board, I so I think like the first or second time I was trying it, and I got really close to the end of the encounter, and I ran out of time rewinds, and a character died, and I was like, well, all right, I got to start it over. No big deal. I'll try. And I'd already been playing for like an hour at that point, and I had to
Mhm.
reset it like 3 or 4 more times because I kept making mistakes, and I was like, well, I want to make sure I have enough charges when I get to the end of the game, and blah blah. And it was just like, and I was like, okay, I'm having a lot of fun doing this. I'm having a lot of fun playing it on Maddening, but as a person who makes content where I talk about video games, it is irresponsible for me to
You're
continue to
never
play it
gonna
on
get
this
through it. You're
difficulty.
never.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like if I
You.
was just a normal person, I'd be like, "Oh, I'll bang my head against the wall forever, whatever, who cares?" But I was
Mhm.
like, "All right, I'm going to bump it down to hard." And it's still hard on hard, right? Like don't get me
Oh yeah,
wrong. It's
it
still
is.
still a good challenge. Um
Mhm.
but it's like it is definitely like quite a bit different. I don't think it's uh like I said, it accentuates things that are already difficult, right? Like, you know how like the heavily armored units, some of the like beefier ones, like especially if there's like a level mismatch, like you'll have it where basically no unit can deal damage on it unless it's a mage.
Mhm.
Like that is like worse in that mode, right? Because it's like, okay, cool, like no other unit can hit this except for a mage, but this unit also hits like a truck, right? So it's
Mhm.
like if I get
So if
in
your mage
range,
gets hit, you're
one
gonna
shot dead.
get knocked out. Yeah.
Easy. Easy. Any
Mhm.
support class, one shot dead. Even my player character, one shot dead, right? And it's like, okay, that's rough. Um, but the bigger thing is the number of enemies. So, like, in that
Yeah.
level, I think on hard, there's like a door, right, that you spawn near that that's like the main way to go in this castle. And I think there's 3 enemies in front of it. On Maddening, I think it was 4 or 5, and then there was 2 units on the side, 3 on the side, 4 on the other side to go where so it's just like a ton of, and then I bumped it down to hard, and I was like, oh, there's 4 less units on the screen when I'm starting. That makes it immediately easier, right, to manage what's happening, right, the two
Yeah.
fronts that I'm trying to fight on.
Mhm.
Because the thing that makes it so difficult, right, is like on maps like that, if you want to go chase the thief and do this other thing, you have to split your unit, right?
Mhm.
Or you need to strategize in a way where you're moving them like in phases so you can defend your backside and then move people up to keep advancing. So it's like there's a strategy to that. But when there's all of these characters on the screen, it's like, okay, if I split.
You're just overwhelmed
Yeah, because
consistently.
you need
Yeah.
more units on to stay together to beat the bigger, tougher guys that are leading the charge, right?
Mhm.
And it just was like, okay, well, I can only really split like 2 units this way, and then if I only put 2 units this way, they can't fight all the characters that are here blocking me, right? So it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, this is like so. It was so hard to um make moves like that in a way that was like efficient. I was making it like
Yeah.
10 turns because I have to be so careful and like never attack on the first turn, right? Because like, one unit's
Yeah.
getting wiped out, shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, so the time travel thing, I don't use that unless it's like I literally clicked the wrong thing and put somebody where they shouldn't be. Like, and I guess this is why what I mean by like, why do I do this to myself? Where I'm like, this is why I play on normal now. I'm like, okay, if I lose somebody at this difficulty, I at least feel like the rest of the game is possible because like you can get yourself into that hole in these games where it's just like you've lost too many people. There's literally no way that you can do it with the units
So
that you have left.
do you
So
you commit to letting characters die if they die
I commit,
organically?
yeah.
Oh,
Three
okay.
houses, it wasn't so bad. There were so many that you could recruit.
Yeah.
In addition to like the house you were in, I kind of want to go back and play that game like with very strict like I'm only going to use this house for this playthrough kind of thing. Um, so it wasn't too bad, and I honestly didn't lose too many because I tend to over level too much because I want to use every unit. I've talked about this where I'm
Yeah.
just like I need to train everybody. I gotta get all the supports. I gotta see all this stuff. So
Same.
I really only lost like Hanuman. Uh, at one point, I think
Whatever.
my yeah, I was like I don't care about this guy. He also doesn't technically die because he's a teacher. He just like retreats and then you can't ever use him again.
Yeah.
And I don't think you get like his final little story vignette at the end. Um, and then I think the only other unit that I I think my Byleth died at some point, but at that point it was just like game over, start the whole thing
Right.
again. And so I was like, all right, well that's fine.
The
Um,
way I use it is if a character dies, I'll replay a turn.
yeah.
Just because, and then that's like, I think, I'm playing it on hard, so it's like, I feel like we're both implementing difficulty in
Mhm.
our own way.
Yeah. Yeah, I just know if I, like, sit there on the hard too long, I'm gonna be like, "Nope, I'm resetting." So but yeah, I do like the rewind overall just because I'm like, I mean, why not? Like, you're gonna accidentally click something at some point. At minimum, it helps you there. Um, but yeah, the missions are it starts out very tutorial, I'd say, the game. It
The first like
definitely, like
3 chapters are like all tutorial, yeah.
yeah, it's like kind of slow buildup of like here's some things to keep track of as you're playing and all these important little details. And I think they've broken it down in a way that's definitely the most inviting I've seen a Fire Emblem get tutorialed out. That said, for me, I was like, oh well, come on, let me get to the real stuff. Like these are all easy battles. Let me do some cool things. But they also do like cool things with like introducing the characters in those. And when you first like use the unit, they introduce themselves. And like, oh, this is a fun little characterization. So I didn't mind going through the tutorial stuff for that.
Yeah, and I like how much of the lines are voiced, right? Like there's a lot
Yeah.
more dialogue. Like the player character, right, has like every line is voiced.
Mhm.
And like there's
Thank you.
there's
I was
both
so tired of a quiet Byleth the entire time in Three Houses.
definitely, yeah, and again, right, like it's similar to Byleth, right? You can be there's a male and female model that have totally different performances, which is cool that they took the time to I think like put some effort into upgrading that side of things in the presentation. And I
Mhm.
think that extends to the like the character animations as well are like so much more detailed.
Yeah.
My understanding is I think a friend told me this. I haven't verified it beyond that, so grain of salt, I guess. But my understanding is that I think they use some mocap to like get more
Oh.
fluid, character animations that feel more lifelike.
Mhm.
And if you get away from that kind of like old school JRPG trope of just like the person talking and moving their arm in the same motion and like their mouth is just flapping kind of thing,
Mhm.
that I think makes a big difference in the presentation. Where like even though I don't think the story
It's
is
not
it
good.
no it's
I think
I
it's
saw
kinda weak.
somebody on Twitter say that like you should take it as seriously as you take like a Saturday morning cartoon that was made to sell action figures. It's like
Mhm.
it's not deep, but it's also not like offensively bad. Like I think it's like it's very uh cheesy and corny in the ways that you would predict a game like this to be, right? Like, I think exactly what you think it was storyline wise. It's like it is that, it's
Mhm.
certainly not anything special, but I think the gameplay systems are just so good that like it doesn't, for me it's not impacting my enjoyment of it in a significant way, right? Where like sure,
Mhm.
the story was I would say one of the main reasons to play Three Houses, where it's like what these casts of characters are so incredible, and like there's so much cool meaty stuff there in the narrative.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, speaking of, like, kind of the gameplay stuff, the base Fire Emblem things, like, if you've played a Fire Emblem, you know kind of the strategy, mechanics and how that plays out. The thing that really tripped me out at first was when you move your units, like, they're actually, like, running around in that
yeah, that
area.
is weird. I didn't like that at first. It doesn't bother me now. I'm used to it, but
The thing I don't like about it is that, like, that type of movement, I got really used to it in Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope.
mm,
But, like, what I like about Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope in that sense is, like, your characters have free movement. They'll move around kind of like in Engage, right? But you can, like, switch characters, leave them standing there, like, in a new spot without taking an action, and then from there, your other characters could, like, do a super jump off of them and combo things
right.
and that sort of thing. So, there was, like, a little bit more to that movement mechanic, and I'm like, "Ah, that would've been, like, kind of interesting in places because sometimes I'm just like, if this unit wasn't in my way right here, I could move my mage and do this attack first
Yes.
before."
Yeah.
So, like, there's, like, little conveniences where I'm like, "Oh, that would've been really nice
It's like if you're
to be
gonna
able
do
to do."
free movement, it would be nice to like lean into
Mhm.
that in some way. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
how do you feel about the return to the rock paper scissors format? Because that was absent in
Mhm.
Three Houses. The whole like, and I'm new to it because Three Houses was my first Fire Emblem, but like
Uh-huh.
I played Heroes a little bit, so I'm kind of familiar. But it's what lance beats sword, which beats axe, which beats lance.
Yes, that's
Right.
the order. I like that it's back. The thing that's really interesting with me with this one is like, do you have any other sword units outside of Alir?
I
Because
have
I'm like,
two. You have a
that's
Lear, and then the princess has a sword as well.
oh yeah, she has one. I just use her magic stuff.
I
I
also
never used the
primarily
sword.
use her as a mage, but you can use her as a sword user.
Yeah, and that's like one thing that's like feels really different with this one. Like the group that you have is so not swords, which is like Fire Emblem tends to be filled with like sword users and
I
stuff.
have
And
so many
then
lance users. I have like four
yeah,
lance
I
users.
feel like they're all lances, and I've
Yeah.
got like an axe, a guy with an axe, and then a bunch of mages and one girl with arrows. I always love archers. I definitely love to train a good archer,
They're
and then
another
some healers.
that was a
You know.
that was a problem too, right? Like with playing on maddening, like those units are so much harder to train, so they're all like underpowered now. So I'm like, let me put them in the front and beef them up a little bit because like my
Yeah.
archer, my healer, my
The
mage just
healers
got some.
were difficult in this one for me,
Yeah,
to train up. But then I discovered so kind of in between battles, you go what's the little section called? Kind of the magical getaway
the
vacation
Somnio.
place. Yeah,
That's
Samnyo.
like the equivalent of the school.
The school, basically, yeah. So there, later on, a little training room opens up, and that's your chance to like give your buff up those
Yeah.
units a little bit, get them some extra experience. I think you could do it 3 times between every battle,
And then you
and I
can
didn't know
also
that at
do it
first.
with the emblems if you have
Yeah,
that currency, which that's really cool too. That you can like get them some of the inherited abilities like on weaker units. Like that makes a big difference. It's like
yeah, that's a
Marth has the
huge
one
thing.
where you can like up evasion and things like that, which can make a weak unit a lot more viable.
Yeah, because then all of a sudden you can throw them up in a place, maybe hide them in like trees and stuff, and they're not going to get touched by anything. And you're like,
Yeah.
sweet, free experience points for now. Yeah, those are cool. So I do like that they like implemented that sort of stuff and kind of took into account like maybe some of these units might be harder to train than others.
Yeah.
uh, which is classic Fire Emblem, that's the difficulty. Like you literally have to choose which units you're gonna stick with for the entirety of the game. Otherwise, like you're gonna reach a point where the others just can't keep up. They won't be able to take
Yeah.
on the enemies. So
That's why I'm like,
um,
I do the same thing you do, where I'm like, I try to cycle people out and make sure I'm like training up a lot of units, because like every once in a while you'll get those matches where it's like, oh, you can only use 7, or maybe now you can use 12 or whatever, and it's like,
uh-huh.
I remember having that moment early in Three Houses where I'm like, oh, I don't have 12 good units. Like the guys that are not on
Yeah.
my A team suck, and being
Yeah,
like,
you start
okay,
to
let me.
realize the gaps in your strategy, right?
Yeah, and it was like, I remember my archer was like really weak because I never got to use him because he was so like, and I had to train him up and
And
plan
you
around
got
it
to
more.
train up those archers. They
Yeah.
become
Oh, I
really
did. I
strong
did once I
units.
realized that I had made that mistake. I was like, all right, let me like really try to push him forward, and then he became one of my best units because it's like, oh, his evasion is like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
he's got 2 health, but nobody can hit him, so who cares, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
Doesn't
it's he
matter.
crits like every other hit, It's like, okay, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, so I like that stuff. The little discoveries though at the Somniel that are just fun. You find that little cat thing, the
Yeah, yeah,
magical
yeah.
cat. Between every battle, I dress it up as something new. I'm like, all right, let me give you this really ugly blue and white toothpaste hair for this one.
Mine's just got the
Uh,
shades on right now.
the shades are great. I love the wings that they got.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the little? They have a cute name for the like bow on the buns. The butt bow.
It's something
What is?
like it's like a bum bow or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, little bow tie on their tail. But yeah, it's just like cute little thing, and I'm still leveling it up. I'm excited to see what happens when you fill the little heart circle
Yeah.
of it. They're like something special, and I'm like, "Psh, I want something special.
Yeah,
I
I'm
like
wondering
this
if it
cat.
like becomes like a unit or like a skill or something, or I don't know,
Hmm.
but I in general I'm liking the Somniel as like a base. I think I like that it's a little bit more I think it's easier to navigate than Garreg Mach because it's just smaller, like
Yeah.
there's a lot less to it. Which I don't know. I guess is both a plus and a minus. Like I think something Three Houses does pretty well is like it has a lot of systems, but there's so much that like you get exposed to over time, whereas like
Hmm.
the Somniel has like just a lot less in general, but I feel like everything is already opened up already, like
Yeah.
fairly early. I'm only like, I think we're both in the same spot, and I don't know how long it took you to get there, but I think I'm roughly like 10, 11 hours in, something like that.
Hmm.
um
Yeah, I'm looking at yours. It says you've got 10 hours so
okay,
far. Because why does Nintendo do this? The only way you can check other
but
friends
not your
on
own. Here,
like
I can check yours.
on releases. Like if you go to the trending tab, you'll see what games your friends are playing. Fire Emblem's there. I'm like, oh, cool. I can see Loud Pete's got 10 hours on here. And then I go to my profile and it's like, first played 3 days ago. I'm just like, tell me my
It's
time.
like,
It's
give
you have
me
to wait
the.
the 10 days.
It's like, why? Why are
Um,
you doing this to me?
I don't know. The other way is like you get the parental control app, but I got too annoyed because you have to like put a code in every time you go into like the eShop or something. And I was just like, I'm not dealing with this. I'm taking this off. No parental control. You guys can play whatever.
What the heck? Why is it's doing the same thing? I'm looking at yours and it says that you played 3 days ago. Well, tell me
But
how.
go to the trending tab, not your
Oh,
friends
oh,
list.
okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, go to the trending tab and then click on Fire Emblem Engage in there.
It says five
And
hours or more.
okay. I think my in-game clock says like 7, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
That makes sense
yeah,
considering I spent like an
yeah,
hour plus
you're
doing that one match over and over again before I bumped it down to hard.
exactly. So that makes see, that's why I can't do that to myself
No, me neither.
anymore.
I'm done.
I know what it's like. I remember spending like 3 hours on missions in Fire Emblem and then losing somebody like way close to the end and being like, "Great. Starting over. Starting it all over." Uh, they take me forever. Um, the other thing, okay, so it's an anniversary game, and I was kind of, the big thing I was skeptical about was just like, I mean, we have Heroes. That's your place to get all your
Right.
past Fire Emblem games. I love this. I didn't think I was gonna love it, but basically all the rings that you get, there's the main emblem rings, which will summon people like Marth to help you out on battle, and you can do like this little fusion dance thing with them, and they'll give you extra bonus abilities that make you
And then
super powerful
you
for 3
fucking
turns.
fusion digivolve and turn into a
You
weird cyberpunk
it's
Fire
your
Emblem character.
Yeah, it's your mega evolution basically for
Yeah.
Pokemon, right? Except you could recharge it and use it again in the same battle instead of just once.
That's what I'm saying.
Um,
It's like Spirit Digivolution, you know?
yeah,
That's what it's called,
exactly.
right? Where the kids would fuse with the Digimon.
Uh-huh. So the thing that I like that I wasn't expecting from it, because they only really highlighted, well, at least I felt like they only really highlighted the main emblem heroes that you'll get. Every ring like is a little gotcha machine where you can get some other ring for your other characters that'll boost their stats in some ways. So those will all belong to the respective game. That
Oh,
certain
that's cool. I didn't realize
characters
that.
in. Yeah, so if you
That's
go to,
cute.
like, the ring room, I think it was called or something, yeah, you can see all the main emblem rings that you've gotten. There's 12 of them
Yes.
in the base game. If you got the DLC like I did, which I don't know where to redeem that, but I should be able to get the 3 houses,
They
leads.
I think it said that there's like an event that will pop up that you can take advantage of. Cool. Let's pivot real quick. I want to talk about that. I hate this season pass. I'm extremely salty that it is $30 and that is the only way
So
for you to get
expensive.
that's the only way for you to get the Three Houses characters, which they know is this new one that like brought all these people
Yeah.
in, and it's like that feels so predatory. This is like the first time I've ever looked at a Nintendo season pass and been like,
They
that's
knew they wanted you to spend money
yeah,
on
and it's like,
this.
come on, man, like that sucks, you know?
Yeah,
Because I
agreed.
obviously want those characters, right? Those are the only Fire Emblem characters in this game that I have any
You
emotional
know.
attachment to.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas, like, right now I'm on chapter 6. I think we were talking before, you just beat this one, but I'm really excited about the emblem ring I'm getting from this one. It's the Micaiah ring, and I'm like, that was my first Fire Emblem, Radiant Dawn on
Nice.
the Wii, which was a sequel to the GameCube one, which I eventually borrowed from a friend and played. I wish I had $300 to just get the GameCube game, but, like, maybe Nintendo remaster it. I don't know.
Maybe you buy a Steam Deck. Who knows?
True. Only $500 in that case.
Yeah, but you can play all the Fire Emblems on
All of them,
it.
every single one. But yeah, I'm really excited about that one because I'm like, oh, sweet, this is gonna be like my old crew, the one that started it all for me, and that's cool. But that mission in particular, light spoilers for another game. It's totally a reference to one of like kind of a pivotal mission in Radiant Dawn. Just like
Okay.
the darkness and everything. They played with that mechanic kind of in the mid game
Mm.
of Radiant Dawn, and it was like intense. I loved that mission because you go this like long stretch of time without seeing these characters, and then suddenly you're back, and you're just like under fire and you don't know where it's coming from. It's great.
That's cool.
So yeah, going back to that darkness mission, I was like, oh, I see what you're doing here. Nice little throwback to that game for this character.
So I want to talk about the throwback nostalgia angle in a second here, but before that, we touched briefly on the engage mechanic. I did just want to like get a temperature check from you on it. How do you feel about that? Because that was a thing that I felt was like, um, I don't know that I really understood how it worked until I got it in practice, and I actually like it a lot more than I thought I would. Like it feels like a fun, meaningful layer to the formula.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's like a good gimmick.
yeah. I think I'm always skeptical about these like new types of things. Especially when they give me like mega evolution vibes and weird Pokemon, like here's this one-time gimmick for this generation of Pokemon kind of thing, you know? But this one in particular, I was like, this is actually pretty cool. I do like how each of the characters has like a new little look depending on how you arrange their rings and stuff, and how those engage mechanics give you just like these boosts of power and different things that you can do. And so in that case, I'm just like, you know what? There's a lot of potential with like how you can build out these missions and the challenges on them that I thought it was a good, interesting way to take this game in particular. Because I'm like, I've played a lot of Fire Emblem games. They all satisfy me immensely, but they're also like, yeah, it's a strategy game. You're gonna do basically the same thing time and time again. Get your units to defeat the baddies and don't die, right? So this one, I'm like, oh, I suddenly have this unit that can just like teleport and take somebody out, and then
Yeah, I
hopefully you put them in a good spot where they don't just
and
get
then
attacked and
immediately die.
demolished right after. Yeah. Um,
I really like how it opens up like new avenues for strategy. Yeah, I
mhm.
like the and forgive me, I'm still learning everybody's name, but the it's the ring you get from the your mother, the one who get the
Oh yeah,
cavalry
that's
guy.
the Sigurd ring?
Yeah. I think it is Sigurd. Um, I love like his ability. It's like he gets to do an attack, and if there are adjacent units, he like goes through them.
Yeah.
So like that's super. There's such a interesting way you can leverage that, right? Because like you can use it to just take out a couple units at once, which is obviously strategically interesting. But also like in the example I brought up earlier, there's like a map where there's like a main quote unquote entrance that you can go into, and then there's like this side path that you can go up, and there's like a thief trying to escape. And as he's escaping to go like steal treasure and then leave the board, you have to like get there before he gets off with the stuff, and then you get the items.
Mhm.
Um, and as he's going up like towards the treasure, the enemy
There's like a few of them all in a single row,
yeah.
right? Real tight quarters. You can't go around them. You have to go through.
Yeah, so it's like you can either sit there and like bait
Take
them
them out
out.
one by one.
Yeah, and fight them one by one, or you can like bait them out and then have like one of your riding units or like your flying unit like go past them and go after the thief. Like you can do that. But if you have his engage, like you can just barrel your way through them, knock out half their health as you're going through, and then have the units that are behind just play cleanup crew, you know?
Mhm.
And I love how like right in that one very small encounter we just described, there's like four different strategies you can employ based on how you leverage those engage abilities, you know?
Mhm.
Or like you said, you
Yeah,
could use
because
the
even the one
teleport.
I was describing, like you could just do the whole teleportation thing and
Yeah.
jump to them. And yeah, there's so many cool new ways to approach missions and like ways that I'm like, oh, I feel like I could be riskier in this game for with these things. Like, yes, they're strong and can get put themselves into like a pretty tough position, but at the same time, like they're strong. They probably handle it. This is cool.
Yeah. And like
Yeah.
having the one of the newest unit I just got with a it's my newest emblem ring. Like the ability is like a world
Micaiah.
heal. Yeah, and it's like ooh, like that's really like that's so new, right? Like that's so different than any of the other abilities I have. And again, it's like you said, like letting you be more risky, right? Like it's like all right, like cool. I'm gonna like make a really aggressive play here. Know that all my units are gonna get hurt real bad, and then I'm gonna bring them
Mhm.
all just back to max health the next turn and like turn the
Yeah.
tide, you know? And it's cool being able to like be like, oh, I'm gonna gamble and like do this thing
Mhm.
that would be risky otherwise, but I know I have this thing in my back pocket that I can pull out.
Yeah, and in addition, I like that they fleshed it out even beyond that, and we're like, yeah, your bond with this emblem will grow, and when you reach certain levels, suddenly you'll be able to add like new abilities to your characters, like we mentioned earlier, where you have the extra avoidance from Marth, you know? So like everybody has the opportunity to like increase that bond, give themselves some new abilities, make the units even stronger, and that's definitely a new way that they've handled those abilities in this one
Yeah.
versus like class abilities,
But
you
you
know?
can also still do that, which is cool because
Yeah.
it like
Mhm.
adds this whole other layer for like because in previous games you could be like, oh, like I was a sword user and then I became a magic user, so like I can still use a sword, but now I have ranged abilities, or like I was a
Mhm.
tank and then I became a mounted unit, so like still really good defensively, but now I'm not like limited to being like slow, and like you were able to make those cool hybrid classes just by like multi-classing and then saving some of your previous abilities or whatever. But now it's like you can do both of those things and do that with the emblems. So it's like, oh, like I could take the evasion from Marth, but I could take like the magic affinity from the one I just got. I forget her name already, but
Micaiah.
yeah, Micaiah, and you've said it like 3 times already. But yeah, and it's like, oh, so like I could like give a character that I never class as a mage the ability to use magic. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Like, okay. It's yeah, it opens up a lot of really interesting options, and allows you like way deeper level of customization of your units, which is
Mhm.
even if they don't
Which was
keep the engage mechanic moving forward, I hope that they find a way to keep something like that, because that's really interesting. Like I like how dynamic it makes each unit.
Yeah, yeah, and they've always had, like, really good ways to build them out and change that with those hybrid classes and stuff, but yeah, just adding this on top of it just changes the whole thing because people will spend forever just being like, "All right, this is the best build for this unit, go for it," kinda thing, and now with this, it's just like, "Oh, there's so much more that you can do with all of them, every single one." Um, so yeah, I honestly like it so much more than I thought I would. I was skeptical. I was, "Ugh," but here I am. I'm just like, yep. Let me go save up as many of my bond points as possible so I can just play the gotcha machine. I want all the characters.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of the characters, let's talk a little bit about the story and everything in just a second here. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of Nintendo Noise is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of January. They are, of course, Anthony Gonzalez, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valens, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Mary Berry, Matthew MQC, Ty the Dude, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of Nintendo Noise and all of the shows we have here at Flip Screen Games. If you want to show your support like they did and get your name read on the air, get the show early, get a bunch of other perks and goodies, head over to patreon.com/flipscreengames. That is, of course, the best way that you can show your support if you want to go above and beyond. But if you don't have any money for us, no big deal. There are dozens of ways you can get involved that do not cost a dime. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to the Discord. You can write into the show. You can find all the ways that you can get involved or find us all over the web. They're all there. Go click the links. However you choose to get involved. We appreciate you tuning into this week's episode of Nintendo Noise. So I think we're gonna keep this, like, I would say, very, very spoiler light. Like, we'll talk about the framing device and everything. If we get to a point where we want to talk about spoilers, we'll give people the out. But I think just generally speaking,
Mhm.
I'd like to answer, I think, some of the more popular questions that I know we had going into it, right? First question I'll ask you. How do you feel it's a good game for fans that do not have nostalgia for the emblem characters?
I think because the gameplay is still so solid in this, I mean, I don't think you're ever gonna miss with the gameplay with Fire Emblem. I think you can start with any of them and have a good time with that. Um, I would say overall the characters, not my favorite I've ever seen in the series. The story doesn't feel like incredibly deep or anything, but I'd say if you were starting with this one, I think it does have a tutorial that's a lot easier to take in than past Fire
That's
Emblem
true.
games. So if that type of gameplay has been one that you've avoided because of that, and just because it's hard, it's a difficult game to play, get into, and they've made it easier over time, and I think they kind of nailed it with this one. Um, so if Yeah, I'd say if you're like new to strategy games, this is probably a good one to start with. But I don't think you'd go wrong with going back to Three Houses either, because that one's got it all. It honestly does.
Yeah, that's I think where I'm at with it. I think if you have never played a Fire Emblem game, I would suggest just go pick up Three Houses. I think if you're like me and Three Houses was your first Fire Emblem and or like, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. Max and I did an episode where we talked about how we had both played Three Houses. That was our first Fire Emblem game. And we're
Mhm,
like, is Engage for us, right? Because it's this anniversary title. It's this game that's very predicated on nostalgia and on, like cool being like, oh, I love that character and the little references, right? Like I didn't pick up on the fact that all the rings that you can get are the characters from the games that those characters are from. That's really cool.
mhm.
Obviously, that meant nothing to me as a new player. Um, but I think aside from those like Easter egg moments not meaning anything to you, that's like it, right? Like I agree with you. The story's shallow, right? It's as shallow as a puddle. It's a very like, you know, it has
There
all
could
the
be a twist later, maybe,
maybe,
but
maybe. Yeah, but
yeah.
it has all the trappings of like a very like it has a lot of tropes that are just true of Fire Emblem, right? Where it's like cool, you got a holy dragon mom and the main character has been asleep for 1,000 years and then they wake up and they have amnesia, of course, and
They
it's
do a
like
lot of amnesia ever since Awakening.
yeah, it's like every
They've
character
stuck to the amnesia
has amnesia.
characters.
So it's like,
Yep.
it's like those are all things that it's like, okay, if you played a Fire Emblem, those will be familiar to you. And there's a lot of like very, I think, basic familiar fantasy tropes on display, things like that. So yeah, I don't think that the story about like the 12 emblems and the dark dragons and all it's very like whatever, right? Like who cares?
Yeah.
And I would agree with you. I don't think the cast is like that strong because the characters themselves are also shallow. So it's like
Mhm.
it's like, oh, do I like their tone of voice and their outfit? Cool, then I guess I like this character. They feel more like paper dolls than like the Three Houses cast, which I think are like they have good backstories and like there are characters in that game that I liked and then I learned more about them and I loved them. Like I think about
Mhm.
like
And even ones
um
that you didn't like, and then you learned about them, and you're
yeah,
like,
and you're
"Oh,
like,
okay."
oh, okay, like you're actually more sympathetic than I gave you credit for, right? Or like,
Mhm.
or a character grows, and you're like, you were immature when in the first half, but then you become an adult, and I like you, and like, there's a lot of depth to those characters, even though they are tropey. This
Mhm.
feels like it's just more tropey, right? It's like a very like basic JRPG anime ensemble cast, and like everybody's super hot, and it's whatever, like cool.
They emphasize the hot for sure.
Yes, that is. Its game feels way hornier than Three
They
Houses,
went
which is already a
all
pretty
in
horny
on
game.
it. Yeah. I'm telling you, before Awakening, they were not this horny.
Yeah, but that's like the last 10 years of games.
It yeah, it's half the series basically at this point, so
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
maybe
It's
I'm the one who's wrong now. The times have changed.
it's been hornier longer than not.
Yep.
But yeah, but I think as long as you can go into it with the understanding that the story is not the main purpose and that like the deep or deeper social sim stuff that was in Three Houses is not present, right? Like there is some light social sim stuff, like you can chat with characters, you can give them gifts. There's a romance option later on, things like that. But it's like all again, it's surface level, right? Like the meat of this game is the combat, right? Is the skirmishes, and those are phenomenal. So like if
Yeah.
you dig the gameplay of Fire Emblem, um, I think you're doing yourself
You'll
a
have fun with it.
disservice, yeah,
Yeah.
if you don't check it out because it's
Mhm.
it's it's good. Like I am so ready to get back to it, and sink some more time into it later.
Yeah, me too. Um, kind of speaking on the social sim aspect to Fire Emblem games. This is something that's like existed in different ways throughout the series. Like the before Awakening was very much like the support conversations is what you'd call them. Awakening had them too, but basically the only way you really got close characters to like bond or get close to each other was like you had them fight like literally next to
Next
each
to each
other
other,
on the
right?
battlefield. Like
Yeah.
that was it. Like the games now are like, oh yeah, you can build your relationships with them outside of that. I think they've kind of maybe I'm hoping they know they took it too far in Fates. When you have people like literally doing some questionable things, blowing into the mic of their 3DS, you're like, okay, this is too much for me. I don't want to blow the steam off of you. Thank you.
It's a
Not.
bridge too far.
It was literally that. Like you'd blow into the mic and I'm like, okay, no, I'm not comfortable with this anymore. um, I think Fire Emblem Three Houses kind of nailed it because I think the setup and the world was really did a good job of like setting that expectation where it's like, yes, you're a teacher, you're teaching these students and everything, and you're gonna have like some interactions with them being on the same campus and that sort of thing. And I was like, cool, they handled it well here. This one feels like they're not focused on that social sim aspect too much. There's like, yes, you can have conversations with them. It doesn't do much outside of like get you the bond points, and maybe there's some support conversations and stuff. But this one definitely feels like throw back in that way where it's like Fire Emblem games just used to be chapter by chapter. There was no in between. Like you'd have a battle and then it'd be like, all right, let's hop to the next battle. You'd get a little bit of dialogue and stuff to set up whatever this battle was, and then it's like, there we go. Let's fight.
Yeah, and
And
in general, this definitely feels more akin to that. Like
yeah.
I think overall, from an outsider perspective, this feels like a more traditional Fire Emblem game.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that? Like, do you think it I don't know. I guess like it's interesting for me, right? Because Three Houses is such an outlier in so many ways. Like it's very different than the games that came before it.
Mhm.
And that being my only frame of reference, I guess I don't know how classic this is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, does this
Mhm.
feel like a throwback title in that way? Or does it feel like just kind of like um I don't know, like does it feel like still feel more modern, but just kind of like reintroducing some of those systems? Or I guess I'm interested to hear as somebody who's been playing these games for a long time, like
I'd say in the sense of like when you start a chapter, like a main chapter, like a numbered one, those feel like, oh yeah, this is Fire Emblem. Like you just clicked on the next chapter and it takes you right into it,
you get a
setting up the
cutscene and then you're in a
scenario,
fight.
getting into the battle. And then afterwards you get kind of a post battle. I think in the way that it's not is that like it does give you stuff after the battle. You usually end up in that area where you battled, like say you had a skirmish at the town, right? You'll end the battle and still be in that town, and you can kind of talk to the residents, adopt some of the
Adopt some
animals, which we haven't even
animals,
talked
yeah.
about. Talk to your characters that you were in the battle with and stuff. So there's stuff in between that I think is like very social sim light that didn't exist like at all in the other in like older Fire Emblems, the pre-awakening Fire Emblems. Basically, the in between was like a menu where you could do look at support conversations and maybe buy some new weapons or sell weapons. So there really wasn't much in between outside of the chapters.
So like I guess does this kind of feel like a mixture of those two things because it's like
Yeah,
pulling some of the stuff from like the newer era?
yeah, I'd say it feels more like a mix because I do feel like if I wanted to play this like classic Fire Emblem, I think that option's there. Like I could just go straight to the next chapter, see the cutscene, do the
Yeah,
battle.
I don't feel like
In
there's a
between.
major incentive to engage with the Somniel aside from, like the
Getting those bond
advantages.
points and playing the gotcha machine, that's all I
Yeah,
wanna do.
right. And it's like, those things are worth engaging with. They give you an advantage or whatever. And there's like the bulletin board where you can like donate to the
Mhm.
towns and up your relationships with them and everything. So like there are mechanics that are worth engaging with, but like yeah, a lot of it feels optional.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say more so in this one, this feels a lot more optional than, than in Three Houses, because Three Houses, like, you had the whole mechanics of like teaching the children and raising their stats or expertise more in certain classes. So
And then,
um
like, I mean, even like there was, you could go to church, and like that was a way to raise certain
mhm,
stats with certain people. You could go fishing. There was the meals that you could have. There was, the garden that you could interact with and like plant stuff, and that was like resource, management. And there was like a lot of little things that you could do,
mhm,
like all over the place. I guess
yeah.
for the next Fire Emblem, what like what do you want? Like, do you want it to be something that is like learning from Three Houses and is like more of a sequel to Three Houses than not? Or do you kind of want to see them take some of these like, more, I don't want to say retro, but like some of these systems that were removed or like modified a little bit in Three Houses? Like, do you want to see those injected back in? Are you like glad to see them back here, or
I I like them. I like what they do with the social sim stuff. I think they definitely nailed it with Three Houses. I think the main thing that I want doesn't really have to do with all of that stuff. I'd rather just kind of like not have an amnesia character and have it just be like a base hero, kind of like those older Fire Emblems before Awakening, where it was like, here's your cast. Like that's what you got to work with. You'll meet people along the ways and have some new recruits and stuff. But I kind of want to go back to like having like a head hero, just somebody who's the main character.
yeah, I'd like to not
The
be like a dragon god again.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been a lot of dragon gods. They've been it was kind of fun in, I guess, Awakening and Fates. You did get like a little bit of character customization and stuff. Since those, they've done Byleth and now Alir, which were like, you got the male, you got the female, you can pick whichever one, but they're going to be those designs, right? And I'm like, if you're gonna do that, like, just give me a designed character with voice acting. And they kind of did that more with this one, where it was like, oh yeah, cool. You actually have your voice,
I
your
like that
lines
Alir has a
voiced.
voice. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure.
Uh, which is weird because like there were voiced lines for Byleth. They were just like so seldom, like it was barely there.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like the way that like Joker is in Persona 5, where it's like he literally has a voice. Like whenever you save the game, he like says something and it's like, oh, that's his voice, and he says Persona, but like then that's it,
yeah,
right? Like in any cutscene, whatever, when anyone else is talking, he's just silent, and it's like
yeah, definitely.
I Persona gets away with it. I think Byleth, it was awkward. Like,
Yeah,
I think like the fact that like characters bring attention to and like, oh, you're like a man of few words, teach or whatever. It's like, can we not like draw attention to the fact that this character just has a blank
does not
expression
speak.
and never emotes, never talks, but is
Yeah.
everyone's best friend and lover? It's like, okay,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think I just want like to have like an Ike to root for in this one, because
yeah.
I think that's what's missing. The casts tend to be like really fun, and you find your favorite characters and stuff. But one thing with Fire Emblem that always impressed me was like your ability to really make their ability to make that like main character like pretty appealing in some way. So yeah, because I think that was difficult with a lot of things. A lot of things you watch, you're like, oh, the main character, they're fine, you know. But with Fire Emblem, I'm like, oh yeah, man, I'm behind Ike all the way. Like, let him be our hero.
Yeah, and I think video games run into that a lot when you have the self-insert character, because it's like, how are you going to do that, right? Because like personally, I think that can work, but I think
Hmm.
it has to be like a true role-playing thing, right? Like I think when I think of the versions of that work the best for me, it's like it's the Grey Warden in Dragon Age Origins, right? And it's like you get to
Hmm.
pick their race, their sex, like their are they hot? Like, if you're a human, were you a noble or were you a commoner? Right? If you're are you a mage? Right? If you're an elf, are you one that lived in the forest and is like clinging to the old ways of their culture, or are you living in the ghettos in a human city? Right? And like all of those things are totally different, and then they allow you to
Hmm.
like role play and have that influence your character. Where it's like, oh, like I'm an elf, so like I'm distrustful of humans, right? Or like I'm a mage, so I don't like Templars, right? Or like Mass Effect does that shit, where it's like you get to really make your shepherd who you want them to be, and
Mhm.
like you get to bring some of your own personality to that character, even though they are like a named character with a voice, and like you don't have nearly as much control over who Shepard is as like you're the Grey Warden, right? In those two examples I brought up, but like it still feels like me. It still feels like my character. Whereas like I don't feel that way about Byleth. I don't feel like Byleth is like me, right? It's just like Byleth feels like a silent protagonist,
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like you just do one or the other, right? Like if you're gonna make it a protagonist that I'm supposed to be the self-insert, like let me decide who they are. Like, are they cheeky and silly and funny? Are they super serious? Like, are they like a classic, virtuous good guy hero? Are they like a devilish rogue? Like,
Yeah.
if you're not gonna give me the ability to make those kinds of choices, I would rather you just be like, this is Ike and this is who he is, and you're him. Like
Mhm.
I think that's just it's way more interesting, like story wise, to just be a
Yeah.
character or
And
not.
there's so much and with that, like, there's so much clarity around, like, who that character is and how they're gonna interact with every other one, whereas, like, I think the way the most recent Fire Emblem protagonists have been, it's just like, they're just a mystery, and we don't know too much about them. There's just not enough info to, like, really get invested in their character, you know? Um,
Yeah,
and I think that also diminishes kind of like what their relationship and conversations become with the other ones around them. So it just feels limiting. So I think that's the big thing I'd like the next game to go back to, just overall. But I mean, that said, too, I do think Alear with the voice acting is fits into that role better, but it's just like such a basic story so far, pretty straightforward that I'm like, oh yeah, there's not too much going on here, so it's not a huge deal.
I think the thing that is most funny to me is that Alear as a character like reminds me of like a kid on their first day of school, because like they have amnesia and like they don't know anything, right? So it's
Yeah.
like the prince character that you meet early on. This is like a light spoiler. The context is that this prince and his sister come from this nation that is like really devout to the holy dragon kingdom people that you come from,
Hmm.
and they have like been coming and visiting you while you've been asleep for 1,000 years, like their whole lives. So like they feel like they have a connection to you already, and like that's like a weird thing. Like most of the characters are like, oh, I know who you are already, so like I feel some kind of way about you even though you don't know who I am. So like that accelerates the intimacy very quickly, because then he
Hmm.
like the prince is like, oh, it's like, I know it's weird for you because we just met, but like I feel like I know you because I already feel like you're like a friend because I've been talking to you for years. And Lear's like, oh, okay, cool, we're best friends now. And it's like, that's how a child makes friends. Like, it's like
Yeah.
you don't know this person
Yeah.
at all, you met 30 minutes ago. Like, okay.
And at they don't even know you. Like they think they do because they just seen you sleeping the whole time. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But shit, how could they know? Like, Alear has no personality because they don't know anything. Like, really, the only, like, okay, this is a serious spoiler. I'm going to make a serious spoiler now. If you don't want to have anything spoiled for you in this super light story, thank you for joining us. Make sure you go check out Haken's about to come back. Go check out the new season of Haken. And we'll have to get Chewy back on again soon. If you're down to ride with these spoilers or you're already playing the game, this is from the very beginning of the game. You're not going to miss anything. So your character has amnesia, right? And the only like sincere emotion that I've seen them express that isn't just like them being like an airhead who's nice is like when their mother, who they don't actually like recognize as their mother, so like they're not actually connected to them, right? She dies, and then they're like, oh, like this is so complicated. I'm like mourning them, but I don't really know them, and like this like lost potential for us to have a relationship, and it's like that is kind of interesting. Like that could be narratively rich, but it basically just boils down to like a scene where they're just like, no, my mom is dead. And then it's just like the next time it gets brought up, everyone's just like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And they're like, yeah, sucks. And it's like, okay, cool, that's it, we're moving on from that. And like,
Yeah, that whole thing was happening, and I was just like, I don't feel anything from this.
how
It's
could
like
you? You know, it's
you
like
don't know her. I mean, your mom knew you, but I mean, she's gone now. Who cares?
they were also like reunited for less than 24 hours, right? Like you show up and she's like, "Oh, you have amnesia. Okay, cool. Like, why don't you just rest and we'll talk more in the morning?" And then it's like she dies the next morning, right? It's like, okay, cool.
Mhm.
Like it's like, all right, great, damn. Like,
Yeah,
and
there's just like
there's no
no
meat.
moment where you were able to build a connection between those two characters at all.
No, and I feel like that's going to be true of every character. I don't feel like I'm going to get to the end of this and be like, damn, like like I felt like at the end of Three Houses where I'm like, man, like Claude and Byleth really like they've been through a lot together, like they're gonna change
Mhm.
the world to like it was like the way my story ended, I was like, this has real like Aang Zuko vibes at the end of Avatar where it's like, damn, they're really gonna change the world together. Like this is pretty cool, And I was like, all right,
Mhm.
like it feels like we really went on a journey here, And I'm like,
Yeah.
by the end of this story, I'm gonna be like, okay, I probably decided that there are like 4 or 5 characters where I'm like, well, I like this guy because he was useful in battle, and I decided to romance this lady because I guess I like her voice actor or whatever, right? Or her model is cool, and it's like that's going to be about the extent of the thought that I have about these characters by the end of it. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is like I mean, I looked it up because I always like to know. There's like 26 chapters in this game. So I'm
Okay.
like, mostly I looked it up because I was like, oh, how many of these are tutorial? Are we getting enough game here afterwards? So a pretty full game regardless. So I'm still kind of hoping like maybe something will connect because there's definitely like stuff going on where I'm like, okay, there's more to this Alear character than we've been told, just based on like little visuals that we've gotten
Yeah, the like
from.
weird demonic version we saw for like 30 seconds, and then before we could get an
Yeah.
explanation, the person who would know anything about it died. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, something's going on there, right? Like,
Yeah, and even them, I was like, how do can I trust this person who's just come shown up and saying they're my mom? Like, I wouldn't believe it if I didn't remember
she
her at
definitely said
first.
a thing where I was like, oh, should we not trust her? Like, there was like a
Yeah.
line that felt like it was foreshadowing like her having like a dark secret or something, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know.
Hmm.
There's gonna be a twist,
So
but who knows? Like, I have a feeling it's not gonna be. I don't know.
it won't be deep.
Yeah, right. Like it's gonna be
We'll
like,
we'll
oh
see it coming, I'm
no.
sure, like several chapters before it happens.
Or it'll be so off the wall, like because like that's the other direction that twists go in like stories
Mhm.
like this, where it's like, all right, it's the 11th hour, aliens are gonna show up, like it's like the Golden Deer thing, where it's like, oh, there's like an underground future society, and you're like, what? And then they're just like, yeah, that's over now. What? Like, okay, all right. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be something like that, probably, right? Like, it's going to be something so incomprehensible, like, deep in lore that's just like the divinity of magic, dragon gods, and emblems. And it's just like, all right, just throw enough proper nouns at me that this makes sense and let's move on, Like, I,
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's where we're going. But like I said, like, that's not the thing, right? Like, the story's whatever. It's a means to an end. And it's good enough because like the thing is I just can't wait to get to the next encounter, and
Yeah.
like I care just enough about what's happening to not skip the dialogue and the cutscenes, and I'm
Mhm.
like I'm reading it more than I'm listening sometimes. I'm trying to get through it, but like
Mhm.
I'm still paying attention to what's happening, and I that's I think literally exactly as much as it needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just keeps you moving, right? And I don't know. I think regardless of like the story being not the strongest, I'm still like, cool. This is a really just fun Fire Emblem game. I like all the little things they're doing with it, and I'm happy that it's out and I can play it right after this. And hopefully, though, I am hoping that I know you hate how they're handling the season pass and
Disappointing.
stuff, but I'm just kind of hoping they put out the stuff kind of at a reasonable time as the game progresses because I'm like I don't know I'm gonna probably finish this game and be like, I don't know when I'm gonna touch this DLC, kind of like what happened with Three Houses, but
Same.
maybe in that time I'll be like, all right, let's go play with the Three Houses Basement Kids DLC. That sounds fun.
And that was the primary reason I didn't buy it. It was like I just don't see
hmm
this coming out quick enough for me to actually take advantage of it. And for $30, it's like a lot to spend just to use the Three Houses characters.
Just to get Claude.
I
Claude's
just
the man.
I just really wish that was piecemeal. I wish I could just get that for like $5 or $10 or whatever, and like not worry
Yeah.
about the stuff that's coming later that I don't know that I'll ever touch. You know, I
hmm
probably would have bit for that, but I'm like $30 is too rich for my blood. As much as I want to use Claude, it's like, all right, maybe next time.
Yep.
Any final thoughts here?
Um, no, I'm excited to play.
Yeah, me too.
That's about
Um,
it. Oh, the cat. I can't say enough about the little cat. Go dress it up. I hope there's more outfits for that thing. That's what I want.
yeah, I imagine there will be. I feel like we're gonna get more of that later.
Uh-huh.
We'll see. But yeah, I would say I'd give it a recommend. You know, I not far enough in it to give it like a numbered rating, but I'd say like if you were on the fence about it, if you are a Fire Emblem fan, even if you're just a Three Houses fan, I'd say give it a go. If you're looking for something to play on Switch, it's well worth your time, I think, and I think you'll have fun with it.
hmm
All right, well, Chewy, it was great to have you back, bud.
Yeah, it's fun.
You'll have to do this again soon.
hmm
So, real quick, give the kids a plug for Haken.
Yeah, Haken is coming back. We've been on break since like August or so, which is a very long time considering we used to do it weekly. But yeah, Haken, an Animal Crossing podcast, should be up by the time you're listening to this. So yeah, you can check it out if you want to hear people geek out on Animal Crossing way after it's relevant.
Which who doesn't, right? Frankly, if you're listening to this
I
show,
know.
I'm sure you probably exist in that camp. So go give it a listen. Go give it a like. All that good stuff. All right. And if you want to connect with us, again, flipscreen.games. That's the website. However you choose to get involved, we appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Nintendo Noise. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Chewy. We'll see you next week.
Bye, goodbye.
Stay engaged. Is that anything?
Probably. All right, let's export.